I've always been the social one, the person who keeps dinner conversations flowing, who makes friends in line at the store, who fills silence when others let it linger. My husband, Daniel, was the exact opposite. Quiet, reflective, never speaking unless he had something meaningful to add. Some people found it intriguing. Most found it awkward. When we got married, even my family teased him. Does he ever talk? My brother joked during his toast. I laughed too, hiding the sharp twist in my chest. Daniel just offered that small, knowing smile he always had. No defense, no explanation. He simply raised his glass and said softly, "It's the quiet moments that tell the truth." Everyone chuckled, thinking it was cute. I remember thinking, patience? What does that even mean? Years went by, and the teasing never stopped. It evolved. At dinner parties, my friends would prod, "Maya, does Daniel even exist? Or did you marry a ghost?" If he spoke slow and deliberate, someone would smirk, "Oh, look, he speaks." And I laughed every single time. Not because it was funny, but because I didn't want to appear overly sensitive defending my quiet husband. Gradually, though, I started noticing a change. Daniel didn't stop showing up to social events. He just withdrew from conversations. He'd sit politely, observing, eyes calm, distant. Sometimes his hand would rest lightly on my shoulder under the table, a silent anchor grounding me. I was too busy keeping everyone entertained to notice him slowly fading from our shared life. One evening, at a small work gathering, the jokes turned sharper. What began as harmless teasing escalated when someone, half drunk, said, "Daniel's the kind of man you forget is even in the room. No wonder Maya does all the talking. She's married to a shadow." Laughter erupted. I froze mid-sip, wine halfway to my lips. I did nothing. I didn't defend him. I just smiled. A brittle, fearful smile, the kind worn when you're terrified to stand out. Daniel didn't respond. He simply looked at me, not angry, not hurt, just quietly observing. And somehow, that silence was louder than all the laughter. The next morning, he made breakfast as usual, eggs, toast, coffee. But the way he set my plate on the table felt final. "You're quiet today," I asked. He smiled faintly. "You didn't notice, Maya, but I've been quiet for years." That line lingered with me all day. For the first time, I really noticed him. The way he waited for others to finish before speaking. How every word he spoke was meaningful, and how no one, myself included, ever truly listened. Weeks later, my parents invited us over for dinner. My dad, who had always adored Daniel but never fully understood him, reminisced about our wedding. "Remember when everyone thought he was mute? You could have married a mannequin and gotten more conversation," he laughed. The same sharp, familiar laughter filled the room. Then Daniel looked up from his plate. Calm, steady, unshaken. No raised voice, no frown. He said one simple sentence that made the table fall silent. "It's strange, isn't it?" Daniel said, placing his fork down gently and wiping his mouth with a napkin. The loudest people often have the least to say, and the quiet ones spend their lives cleaning up the noise. The laughter stopped mid-breath. You could hear a pin drop. My mother froze, fork halfway to her mouth. My brother's smirk dissolved into awkward silence. Even I sat speechless. Daniel wasn't angry. He wasn't trying to win. His calm, measured tone hit harder than any shouting could. He leaned back slightly. "I've never minded the jokes. What I mind is that silence is mistaken for emptiness. It isn't. It's observation. And sometimes what we observe tells us more about people than what they say." Then, with a soft smile, he continued eating as if nothing had happened. The rest of the meal was quiet. Too quiet. My father cleared his throat, searching for a new topic. But the atmosphere had shifted. Every word now felt heavy, deliberate. At home, I didn't know what to say. I wanted to apologize. But for what? Laughing with them? Not stopping them? Only realizing now that he had been hurt all along? He washed dishes in silence while I watched. Finally, I whispered, "You embarrass him." He glanced at me, drying his hands. "No," he said softly. "They embarrass themselves. I just stopped helping them hide it." That night, lying beside him, I reflected on all the times I had laughed at his expense, mistaking stillness for weakness. I wanted him to be more like me, social, expressive, loud, because I equated that with confidence. But Daniel's calm wasn't shyness. It was strength disguised as quiet. The next week at work, I caught myself pausing before speaking. I noticed how often people filled silence with meaningless chatter to avoid discomfort. I saw laughter used as a shield rather than a sign of joy. And suddenly I understood him. A few nights later, friends came over, the same group who once made him the punchline. Midway through, someone attempted a familiar joke. "Come on, Daniel, say something before we forget your voice." Everyone chuckled nervously. This time I spoke first carefully, politely. He tends to speak only when it matters. You might not like what you hear. The laughter stopped again, just like at my parents' dinner. But Daniel's eyes met mine, and for the first time in a long while he looked proud, not because I'd offended him, but because I finally understood him. After everyone left, I asked, "Did it ever bother you?" "The jokes," he thought for a moment. "It used to," he admitted, "until I realized that when people mock what they don't understand, it's not about you. It's about them trying to silence what makes them uncomfortable." He reached for my hand, warmth in his eyes. "You used to be uncomfortable with silence, too." I smiled faintly. "Not anymore." "Then you finally started listening," he said. "It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't romantic. It was just honest. And somehow, that honesty filled the quiet more than any laughter ever did. Over time, I changed. I stopped rushing to fill every pause in conversation. I didn't feel the need to prove myself. I learned that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is say nothing, to let silence reveal who's truly comfortable with themselves and who's terrified of being unseen. People still talk too loud. They still make jokes that aren't kind. But now I smile, not in anger, not in superiority, but because I understand what Daniel's patience meant that night years ago when he said, "It's the quiet moments that tell the truth." He was right. They do. And that one calm sentence, the one that silenced everyone, didn't just shock the room. It changed the way I listen, the way I love, and the way I measure strength.